All right, folks, the story I'm about to share with you, quite frankly, should piss you off. And I know there's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in politics. And what I'm about to tell you may not seem like a big deal in the grand scheme of things. And in many ways, it's not. In other ways, it really, really is because it speaks to the ability of Democrats to win elections in the future by delivering results for the American people that the American people recognize is because of Democrats. Donald Trump and the Republicans took just another massive step forward in trying to seize credit for stuff that Democrats did, President Biden in particular. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, let's just skip to the subject, and then I want to show you a sign. The subject is, as you can see here from the New York Times, Trump tried to kill the infrastructure law. Now he's getting credit for its projects. Signs bearing Donald Trump's name have gone up at major construction projects financed by the 2021 law signed by President Biden, which he strenuously opposed ahead of its passage. Chris Mowry, who is a Gen Z Democratic influencer, he works with Adam Mockler. He's part of Mockler Media. He puts it really well in these two signs. Joe Biden passed the largest infrastructure bill since Eisenhower, and red states got the majority of the funding. Trump opposed it. Now Trump is changing all the signs to claim credit. What a massive piece of shit. Well said, okay? So you see it here. Sign one, President Joe Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. And then on the other side, a red MAGA-style sign, Philadelphia Rail Yard Modernization, President Donald J. Trump, rebuilding America's infrastructure. And then in very small script there at the bottom, funded by the infrastructure bill created by President Biden. We have another example here, Seattle Rail Yard Modernization. I think it's a different one. Yeah, that's Philadelphia. This is Seattle. You look here again, financed by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in very small font. That's where we are, folks. And this is why I say in the grand scheme of things, it may not seem like a big deal, but this is really important because it speaks to what Democrats can do in terms of the power when they get it, and also doing it in a way which nets them credit. It speaks to the transactional element of politics. So again, this should piss you off. This is a big deal, okay? Let's take a look at this New York Times article. In southern Connecticut, the federal government is replacing a 118-year-old bridge along America's busiest rail corridor. The $1.3 billion project was largely funded by the 2021 infrastructure law that was championed by then-President Joe Biden and strenuously opposed by Donald Trump. These days, however, motorists cruising by the construction site might be forgiven for thinking that a certain famous New York developer was responsible for it all. Quote, President Donald J. Trump, assigned by the road, declares, rebuilding America's infrastructure. In recent months, a number of similar signs have popped up in front of major infrastructure projects financed by the bipartisan 2021 legislation, a $1.2 trillion package that Trump, who left office in January of that year, had passionately railed against. He called the bill, quote, a loser for the USA, and warned that any Republican lawmaker who signed on could be thrown out of office by angry primary voters. Quote, Patriots will never forget, he wrote. The signs bearing Trump's name now adorn bridge projects in Connecticut and Maryland, rail yard improvement projects in Seattle, Boston, and Philadelphia, and the replacement of a tunnel on Amtrak's route between Baltimore and Washington, according to W. Kyle Anderson, a spokesman for the company. In an email, Anderson said the new signs, quote, are a voluntary Amtrak initiative, updating outdated signage posted at a project location listed previously following the change in presidential administrations earlier this year. The signs note in a smaller font that the projects in question are, quote, funded by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the official name of the legislation that Trump tried to derail. Still, the signs in bold MAGA red strike some as misleading. You think? Representative Joe Courtney, a Connecticut Democrat who represents the area where the Connecticut River Bridge is being replaced, said seeing the sign with Trump's name there, quote, is just, very odd to me. He added, quote, that bridge would never have gotten where it is today without that bill, which he opposed. It's hardly unheard of for a new administration to replace signage featuring the name of the previous president. But the 2021 infrastructure law has uncorked particularly intense debates over the granting of credit, perhaps inevitable given the size of a spending package that was roughly the size of the GDP of the Netherlands. Last year, amidst election season, Politico compiled a list of a number of House Republicans who voted against the bill, but went on to take credit for bringing projects funded by the legislation to their districts. Representative Nancy Mace, who is currently running for governor in her home state of South Carolina, called the bill, quote, a socialist wish list, but did not protest the millions of dollars it allocated to public transit upgrades in the Charleston area. But what do you want me to do? Turn my back on the Low Country when we get funding for public transit? She said when asked about the apparent contradiction, according to a local newspaper. A number of infrastructure projects formerly featured signs name-checking Biden, said Mr. Anderson, the Amtrak spokesman, quote, project funded by President Joe Biden's infrastructure law, some of them stated. Those, too, drew backlash. In June 2024, Ted Cruz complained about them to the Office of Special Counsel, arguing that they amounted to campaign signs for Biden and thus violated the Hatch Act, which limits federal employees' activities. Quote, these displays are nothing more than campaign yard signs courtesy of the American taxpayer, Mr. Cruz wrote at the time. The special counsel's office investigated the matter, disagreed with Cruz, and closed the case. This week, Cruz's office did not respond to an email asking whether the Trump signs might also violate the Hatch Act. Infrastructure questions are sensitive for Trump, who ran for president in 2016, asserting to voters that he was one of the nation's great master builders, promising an era of infrastructure rebuilding program to rival the New Deal era. But he never quite pulled it off. In fact, his administration's repeated efforts to hold an infrastructure week became a running joke during his tumultuous first term. In April, 3 months after Trump began his second term, the Federal Railroad Administration stripped language from its grant agreements that had required signs about projects made possible by the 2021 legislation to say they were funded by President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. The Connecticut Department of Transportation took this as a signal to remove signs with Biden's name, said Josh Morgan, department spokesman. The replacement of the Connecticut Bridge, which connects the towns of Old Lyme and Old Saybrook, is expected to generate up to 300 jobs. According to Courtney, the existing bridge was found to be structurally deficient in 2006. Trains must now slow down to 45 miles per hour to cross, he said. They will be able to cross the new bridge, he said, at 70 miles per hour. At the dawn of the second Trump administration, Amtrak had good reason to worry about its future. In March, when Elon Musk was deeply involved in slashing federal government programs, the billionaire said the company, quote, was embarrassing and should be privatized. Representative Pramila Jayapal is a Democrat whose Seattle district includes a rail yard project where some of the signs were put up. She speculated that Amtrak may have posted them to remain in Trump's good graces. Quote, look, I think what we're seeing is Trump demanding loyalty from every government agency, she said. Whether or not that is the case, Amtrak appears to be on a more secure footing in the early months of the Trump administration. Sean Johns Gale, Vice President of Policy for the Rail Passengers Association, an advocacy group that seeks to improve passenger rail service, said that after the scale of Musk's call for privatization, the administration ended up releasing a presidential budget for passenger rail that is, quote, very measured and, quote, allows for Amtrak to keep running the trains and making some key investments. Asked about the signs, a spokesman for the U.S. Department of Transportation said in a statement that Amtrak was recognizing the Trump administration's, quote, swift action in clearing a backlog of roughly 3,200 grants that the Biden administration had allocated but not awarded. The process had been sped along, the statement said, by, quote, cutting unnecessary DEI and climate mandates from the grant process. Amtrak news releases showed that construction on some projects featuring Trump signs began in the Biden era, including the Connecticut Bridge and the $2.7 billion replacement of the Susquehanna River Bridge in, Maryland. Anderson, the Amtrak spokesman, praised the transportation department's, quote, hard work, which he said helped address the backlog. He added, quote, we appreciate the Trump administration's strong support for Amtrak's historic infrastructure investments. So here's why I said this should piss you off if it's not clear yet. We are now living in an environment that is even more asymmetrical for Democrats than ever, okay? There were already so many institutional disadvantages which plagued us, so many internal advantages which plagued us. And now we have to deal with this, okay? President Biden managed to get in 1 year something done that Donald Trump promised for 4 years and failed. Remember, as the article notes, Trump promised for 4 years to have an infrastructure law. And he had control of Congress, both the Senate and the House, for 2 years. 2 years. He had the White House, the House, and the Senate. And, better than Biden ever did, he had the United States Supreme Court in his back pocket because It was already a Republican majority. And yet he failed to get this done. Biden, who is a more experienced, more competent legislator and executive than Trump, was able to get it done in 1 year. Again, an apples to apples comparison, proving that Biden was objectively better than Trump. And now, because Trump, due to sheer dumb cosmic luck and the stupidity of both candidates and the American people as voters, have given Trump back the White House, now Trump is taking credit for shit that he not only had nothing to do with, but actively opposed. And there's nothing stopping him. Now, Democrats probably can and probably should do what they can to push back on this, but those fucking signs are going to be everywhere. And Democrats can't be standing out in front of those signs 24/7. So it's kind of like how during Trump's first term, he tried to take credit for Democratic proposed stimulus checks. It's the Democrats' idea, and the Democrats got it done, but Trump put his name on the checks. This, I would argue, in some ways is worse, because you could at least say, well, sure, it was the idea of the Democrats, but Donald Trump did sign the stimulus packages into law for COVID, right? So he at least played a role in getting the checks out. That's true. She should not get all of the credit. He tried to steal all the credit, and he was successful. How much did we hear anecdotally for years from people going, Donald Trump sent me a check during COVID? Now, Biden sent a bigger check during COVID, but Biden didn't put his name on it. And even Biden himself, in his last year in office, I think it was after he stopped being candidate, but in the speeches that he made, it was either while Kamala was running or it was even after the election, but before Biden left office, he goes, it was stupid of me. It was stupid of me not to put my name on the checks. It's something I learned from Trump. And I get it. Trump changed the game of politics. That's not how people used to act, but that is the name of the game now. And Democrats better get fucking on board with this. They better get on board with it. The moral of the story is we don't live in a dignified West Wing style universe. Democrats, if you ever get back in power, you put your name on everything good and you put Trump's name on everything bad. You have to be as petty and vicious as this. Again, I understand the grand scheme of things. It may not seem like a big deal, but people will remember this. The reason they're putting the signs up is because they're banking on the people driving across those bridges that Biden built. They're going to give Trump and the Republicans the credit, which could help save them in the midterms, which could help them in the 2028 election or the 2032 election. This is a big deal, folks. This is a big deal. And it speaks to just simply delivering results isn't enough. So many people say, just you provide for people, they'll reward you. No, that's not true. You should provide for people, but you have to make sure, and you can't just assume. You need to laser it into their heads. You need to use every time you speak in public or the microphone that you are giving yourself and your party the credit, and not just assume that the credit will be given to you. Look at this. Look, it's night and day. It's staggering. This should piss everybody off because it makes the challenge of defeating Republicans and delivering results for the American people, which was always difficult, that much harder. So yes, you should be pissed off about it, and you should be demanding of all your Republican lawmakers, hey, set this whole West Wing shit aside. You go out there and you take the credit for everything good, and you give them the blame for everything bad. You have to play by the Trump playbook because that is the playbook that will dominate politics for the foreseeable future. And as long as they're playing by it, Democrats have to play by it too. So congratulations to the Biden administration for succeeding where Trump failed. But also, Trump is now in a position and he's going for broke, breaking all sorts of norms, traditions. We see the hypocrisy there. Ted Cruz, Biden can't take credit for a bill that he passed, but Donald Trump can. The hypocrisy is staggering. It should piss everybody off. It's going to make winning elections and convincing the American people that Democrats can deliver that much harder, even though the credit should be to the Democrats' favor. It is now going to redound to Trump's benefit. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.